How can you just have hate in your heart for no reason? Like, we're born here. I'm born here. Like, listen to my accent. I was born around the corner, 10 minutes down the road. So where do you want me to go back to?
Overnight, the racism and what we're seeing on the streets, it's horrific.
Get them out of them hotels. Get them gone. Put them on boats and send them back. Okay? They shouldn't be here.
I suggest you look towards the Houses of Parliament because those are the people who put you in poverty. We ain't going anywhere.
What's up, good people, and welcome back to the channel. Many thanks for dropping in, and many thanks for your support. If you are black or brown and British, black or brown and African, and you intend to travel to the UK today, then you know you're in trouble. 3 young lives were recently lost in the UK, and apparently minorities are guilty of this crime. So you are all lumped into this one basket, guilty as charged. Apparently, if you are a minority as well, black or brown, you are guilty of taking away jobs that belong to indigenous British. Never mind that you may have been born and raised in the UK, it doesn't matter to them. The other narrative also is that if you're black or brown as well, you have never helped Britain in any way, shape or form to create this vast wealth that Britain is so proud of. The mighty Britain has never ever benefited off your sweat, off your blood in the history of that nation. But I think it's time to bust that myth. Is that really true? Are you guilty simply because of the color of your skin? Is that really the case, Britain? And I know for sure this is a certain segment of British society, not the entire country. But it's time that we explore that. Let's take a critical look at what really is going on around that whole issue. The involvement of black and brown people in that society. Do they really have a stake? This is Afrocentric. Let's take a deep dive, and please feel free to share your comments in the comments section. Contrary to the common narrative, Britain's wealth did not arise from sheer brilliance. History tells us otherwise. Britain ruled at a time when the world was brutish, sheer force. And so the British Empire went about colonizing, conquering, exploiting resources, exploiting humans, and pillaging across the world. That is how the British Empire was built. You will remember the Opium Wars of China, the brutal suppression of Mau Mau in Kenya, for example, which happened till the late 50s before Kenya eventually got independence. So Britain's legacy is one of exploitation and violence. Several millions of humans were displaced in their various locations, forced to labor as subjects for the British monarchy, labor for the Empire of Britain, Great Britain as they call it, displaced, lost land, I mean, you name it. It was savage. Yet in this day and age, it is very easy to forget, as we are seeing in Britain now, that out of these colonies also came people that worked and supported the British Empire across the world in the colonies, but certainly also within British soil and in the battlefield, fighting to liberate Britain from the yoke of brutal fascist forces by people like Adolf Hitler. So if it wasn't for the bravery of these subjects and the sacrifices that they made, the lives that they lost, Britain may never have won this war at all. You will remember that the Allied forces finally carried the day. But America never supported Churchill in his fight to the very last minute. It got to the wire before the US finally came on board and helped Britain manage a final conquest. That is history. So the role of those from the colonies in ensuring that Britain won that victory cannot be gainsaid. It cannot be denied. Those are the same individuals who, after the war, either moved to Britain, became part of what was later on known as the Windrush generation arriving in the UK that enabled Britain to return from the brink, to rebuild London, to rebuild England after being ravaged by Hitler's bombs. So the Windrush generation then brought their language, brought their culture, brought their tradition, and immediately became part of the British culture, British fabric. Their contribution obviously then became the bedrock, the foundation that now built a multicultural society that we see as England today. And one would at least want to hope that the arrival, the influx of these populations from Asia, from Africa, from the Caribbean, brought an infusion of culture that, if not for anything else, if not just for rebuilding Britain, also helped enrich the society of England. So there are a good majority of Brits who appreciate that journey, who appreciate that history, who obviously see that where the world is today, there is need for humans to live together, for diversity to inform our lives, and that in the global village that we have today, you cannot stop the migration of populations, either for greener pastures or just travel, tourism, as indeed Brits are also all over the world. You have the British in America. America is an immigrant society, by far, invaded by foreigners, largely from Europe, running from persecution by the powers in church in England and other places. So the feudal system in the Western world, especially Europe at that time, pushed these populations out of Europe into the Americas. We remember the French Revolution, largely informed by the feudal system and the monarchy that was greedy. So it is interesting to note that today, generation of British who perhaps have no idea of their history, who clearly do not bother to fact check, find out the journey of Britain to the point where it is today, are at the forefront of oppressing those they regard as minorities, Asians, blacks, coloreds, and to an extent, religious groups. It's a disappointment for many that their place in Britain today can be challenged by a generation who seemingly do not know their history, and that is what is fueling the chaos in UK today.
It's crazy, like, I don't understand what their school of thought is. Like, how can you just have hate in your heart for no reason? Like, I don't get it. Like, you want everyone to go back. It's not as simple as just go back to your country. We're born here. I'm born here. Like, listen to my accent. I was born around the corner, 10 minutes down the road. So where do you want me to go back to? This is home, Whips Cross. I live on St. James Street. So where do you want me to go back to? I don't get it. And if you look down your lineage, their grandparents probably came from, I don't know, maybe Germany or Scotland or Ireland or whatever. Maybe because they might be white or whatever, but it doesn't mean that you have a divine right to be here. And maybe the reason why some of our parents are here is because there's better opportunities here. Our countries were invaded years ago. Like, it's not a simple solution as just everyone go back. So we need to educate them.
That's a very good point. We need to educate them. I think there's a serious gap in history in the British society. But also there's a problem with the political class sending the message that immigrants are unwanted.
And we will finally stop the boats.
Sentiments like those of former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak obviously served to legitimize the sentiments of a certain section of the British society, the rhetoric that immigrants do not offer any value to Britain, and that immigrants were bound to change the British way of life. So that narrative of turn back the boat, pushed largely by former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, obviously ignores the history of Great Britain and fails to acknowledge the debt it owes to those who now live and form part of the British fabric, the multicultural society that Britain is today. What do they get now? They get a kick in the butt. For minorities in the UK, and even for us who live in Africa, in the Caribbean, in the US, elsewhere, the violence that we have seen seems to be something that has been simmering within the society of Britain. It tells of hostility within the fabric of the British towards minorities who exist in that country. Obviously, Britain has its own social problems, but it does feel like the reaction, the implosion that happened in Britain is being meted out as a scapegoat against issues and problems within England, within the British society. A lot of times the buck stops with the Prime Minister and the MPs, the members of Parliament in England.
You are now connected to Air Force One.
Okay, thank you.
It's foolhardy to imagine that Britain's success can be divorced from the involvement and the engagement of these nationals from the other countries across the world. The blood and sweat of these subjects of the English monarchy who came in to help cannot be denied. It is definitely woven within the fabric of the British society, within the capital and obviously the wealth that Britain has generated through generations. So Britain cannot run away from that. And oftentimes you hear the question, you guys talk about reparations, how much you want to be paid.
What sort of sums are you thinking of?
There's also the question of, it is our ancestors, or it is not us who did it. But it fails to look at the fundamental thing, that Britain is what it is today,
Government House in Nairobi,
based on its colonial legacy across the world, based on its pillaging across the world,
means of ridding their colony of the Mama.
based on the slave trade, certainly based on the rebuilding by the Windrush generation that arrived in UK to resuscitate Britain in the Second World War. Those are hard truths that the society of Britain must accept and embrace, that where the world is today, we are better off working in concert, working together. That is the very reason why many nations across the world today have mixed nationals from across the world that inform that society. That is something that Britain needs to acknowledge. That is a message that the political elite, the government of UK, needs to send out robustly to its population so that they may arrest this problem in the UK. If they don't do this, there is a high risk that British nationals across the world may just face a similar fate. An eye for an eye will certainly make the world blind. Do we need to go there? Your answer is as good as mine. This is Afrocentric. Many thanks. If this resonates with you, if you can relate to this, kindly like, subscribe, ring that bell. You don't want to miss out again. Many thanks indeed, and we'll see you. I'm out.